Okay, we are at a regular session with the Board of Education. The board has already met in executive session. We have done the salute to the flag already. You do the roll call already? You do it here? Okay. We'll do the roll call, please.
Mr. Byrne? Here. Mrs. Cassell?
Here.
Mrs. Richmond?
Here.
Mr. Markarian? Here. Mrs. Warner?
Here.
Mrs. McGowan?
Here.
Mrs. Shaw?
Here.
Mrs. Gray? Here. Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Mrs. Woolridge?
Here.
Mr. Syed? Here.
Thank you. So I'll call the meeting to order. I just would like to draw your attention to the statement of public notice in your agenda. You can read that yourselves, but just note that when you got to the microphone to speak, that you should put your name and address on the clipboard. There are 2 times for public comment. Earlier in the meeting, there's public comment on agenda items, and at the end of the meeting on non-agenda items. And the meeting is being recorded. We don't seem to have a student representative, so we'll skip over item 7. And that means we are up to the superintendent's report.
Good evening. So we're going to start tonight by acknowledging the retirement of John Fry. Susan Philhauer is also retiring mid-year, but she was unable to attend tonight. So Mr. Howlett came to talk a little bit about Mr. Fry. So welcome, Mr. Fry. If I had to guess, I'd say we might have brought a distinguished guest there. And Mr. Howlett, I think you might just have to press that button on that microphone and you have the floor.
I didn't even have to push the button. All right. Mr. Fry, why don't you please come on up and join me? Well, this isn't much. John Fry entered the field of education after a successful career in private industry, coincidentally as the COO of the Red Devil Corporation. He has been a teacher for 13 years and is completing his 11th year at Ridge High School. Mr. Fry earned his Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Villanova University and his Master's in Mechanical Engineering from UPenn, where he would work towards his PhD in Biomedical Engineering and attain the status of ABD. He would further his education with an MBA in Industrial Management from FDU and a post-MBA in Supply Chain Management from Rutgers University. At Ridge, Mr. Fry has taught physics, astronomy, and an SAT course, served as the freshman football coach for 7 years, monitored Saturday detention, taught homebound students, and was active in the mentoring program. Over his years of teaching, John has had many recognitions and awards. Among his most memorable are the College of New Jersey's Outstanding Educators Award in 2008, the RHS Teacher of the Year for 2009, Ridge High School's Senior Class Favorite Teacher for 2012, 13, and 14, nominated for the American Association of Physics Teachers Paul Zitzowitz National Award for Excellence in Teaching Physics in 2014. John asserts his most memorable experiences as graduates coming back to say hello and telling me how successful they are and how much they enjoyed physics. Mr. Fry explains his educational philosophy by stating, the most important commodity of a teacher is enthusiasm, compassion, and a great sense of humor. I realize that young people can feel alienated at times and unsure of what the future holds. So I listen, answer questions, and reassure them. I try to provide them with opportunities to succeed, to relate their education to real-life applications, and to take lessons learned about physics and life with them. I want my students to know that I care about them not only in class, but beyond the classroom walls. Mr. Fry is recognized by his colleagues as a man of integrity and a person who is dedicated to the education of young people. He continuously works collaboratively with others to reach common goals. Throughout his teaching career, Mr. Fry was one of the first teachers in the building and one of the last to leave. Upon retirement, Mr. Fry says he will get elected to the school board, travel the U.S. and Europe, spend lots of time with my family, tutor science and math, mentor underprivileged children, and plain just stay busy. Congratulations, Mr. Fry.
Congratulations, Mr. Fry, and thank you, Mr. Hallett, for sharing those kind words. And I do believe that we forgot the president. So, on behalf of the board, Mr. Fry, we hope you appreciate that gift.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Mr. Hallett.
I'm not used to being the president.
I know, you get the present. Okay. So there's 3 other items under superintendent's report that we actually need to take a roll call vote on, but let me just briefly run down what they are. The first item is the approval of the Uniform State Memorandum of Agreement, which is between education and law enforcement. This is the annual resolution that we have to pass, whereby we are memorializing the fact that the Board of Education and law enforcement agreed to communicate very clearly on certain issues. For example, if there's any kind of crime committed in our school district that we're aware of, we immediately have to contact the police. So this document kind of explains those procedures, and we have to have a resolution for it annually. Just so you know, there haven't been any changes in this document from last year to this year. We have our HIP report. We did have a few investigations so far this year. Item number 4 is the required self-assessment that we have to do with respect to the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, which is essentially a self-assessment of how well we are implementing practices and procedures for HIB. This resolution is simply acknowledging that we are submitting our self-assessment to the state, and then the state will take a look at it and give us feedback based on all of the reports that we're already submitting electronically through a system called the NJDOE Homeroom. So we have to submit all of our evidence for the procedures, the trainings, all the HIB investigations. Everything goes through the NJDOE Homeroom reporting website, and then they'll take a look at those documents in conjunction with our self-assessment scores to give us feedback. And as you can see, immediately following this roll call, I will present all the statistical information on both the HIB for the second half of last school year, as well as the code of conduct for the entire 13-14 year.
Anybody have any questions or comments before we take a vote?
I again question whether this is doing any good. It certainly costs the district quite a bit of money, and I don't sense that HIB violations are going down. So I understand it's the law, but it's a very expensive law for us, and I don't think it's doing any good. That's an opinion. Now, maybe Mr. McCarry can talk to that when he makes his presentation.
I will.
So we never moved them. Okay, it sounds like to move items 1 and 3.
Actually, I'm going to move items 2 to 4.
And Linda will second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes?
Mrs. Swarner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gregg?
Yes.
Mrs. Cassell?
Yes.
Mrs. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Richard?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Bouldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McHugh?
Yes. I don't think your microphone is working. All right. Mine? Because I'm not wearing it. I have to hold it like this, or I'll just hold it all the time. Okay. And I think you had something.
Yes, I wanted to follow up on the one other thing. It's not necessary for it to be an agenda item this month, but I would like to make it an agenda item in the future, in October. If you recall last school year, one of the things that we talked about doing with respect to the Somerset County Prosecutor's Office was to arrange a canine sweep up at Ridge High School. So I touched base with them again this fall, about a week ago, to talk about how they'd like me to proceed in terms of working with them on getting that arranged. And they suggested that they would like me to kind of reiterate that this was the intent and the desire of the board, and that we had provided notice to the community. So what I felt we could do under superintendent's report at either the October 6th or maybe the October 20th meeting is advertise ahead of time and let the public know that we'll be briefly talking about that again, and making sure that it's still the desire of the board to do this, and making sure that the public has an opportunity to comment on it before we go ahead and formally request that the county prosecutor's office work on arranging this. We did it last year, and then in working with them, they thought the timing would be better if we could hold off until doing it this year. So we did that, and now they're asking that we kind of reaffirm that this is something that we want to arrange. So I want to make sure that that's on the radar for folks who might want to comment on it at the public meeting, so that you can have that input before we ask the prosecutor's office to help make those arrangements.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so we are up to board presentation. I think we're going to go down below for that.
Okay. So each year, we're required to report out on EVVRS, which is the Violence and Vandalism Reporting System. The E is for electronic. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, there is a state website called the NJDOE Homeroom, which is the portal that they use for gathering data about school districts. And one of the things that they gather data on is school violence, vandalism, and HIP, or harassment, intimidation, and bullying statistics. So that reporting has to occur every 6 months. They divide the year in half, and you report out on each half of the year. And the second thing is the student code of conduct, which our board policy requires that we report out on an annual basis. So this meeting tonight is to talk about three things. The first is the electronic violence and vandalism reporting for a period of time between January and June of last school year. So from January 1st to June 30th of the 13-14 school year. So please just kind of keep that in mind, that when we're looking at the slides and we're comparing 13-14 to 12-13, we're talking about a comparison between the second half of the 13-14 school year compared to the second half of the 12-13 school year. Okay? And that's true for both the violence and vandalism reporting and the HIV reporting. When we get to code of conduct, that'll be for the whole school year from September to June. So first, the electronic violence and vandalism reporting system from January to June. So in the 13-14 school year, we reported 39 incidents of violence or vandalism compared to 31 during the same time period in the 12-13 school year. This is a breakdown of where the incidents occurred in each category between the two time periods. So the first category is violence, and you can see we had an incident at Cedar Hill, one at Oak Street, and 3 at Annan. This is a breakdown for vandalism. We had 1 incident at Cedar Hill, 3 at Annan. We had no weapons, which is also a category that gets reported as part of the violence and vandalism reporting system. We didn't have any incidents at all in the last couple of years in the second half of each school year. Substance abuse, again, spring to spring between the 12-13 school year and the 13-14 school year. And finally, HIV between the spring of 12-13 compared to the spring of 13-14. So last spring we had 27 reported incidents that were confirmed. Okay? It's important to note that we do a lot of investigations in HIV. The investigations that get reported in EVVRS are only the investigations which are in fact confirmed positive. Okay. So this is a breakdown of where the 39 different incidents occurred, both by school and the location within each school. So the highest categories, as you can see, are at the cafeteria, other inside locations, and the school bus. The HIV reporting is, remember, a subset of the EVVRS reporting system. Okay? So when you look at EVVRS, it includes 39 incidents, 27 of which were HIV related. In the HIV reporting system, it's a separate piece of the EVVRS where you're reporting more specific statistics about those 27 incidences that are within the EVVRS system. These are the investigators that worked on these different situations. Last year, we moved to having our student assistance counselors as well as our school counselors work on investigating the situations. They are known as the anti-bullying specialists in each school. And it's important to note that their function is to gather information about the situation. It is not to make a determination for what discipline may or may not occur. Only a certified school administrator can issue discipline for a student. So their role is an investigatory role. In the spring of 13-14, we did 61 investigations, and as you probably noticed from the EVVRS data, we had 27 confirmed incidents. In the spring of 12-13, we did 31 investigations and had 18 confirmed incidents. So when we take a look at these different investigations, what are we seeing? When we look at all of the different confirmed positives that occur, okay? And if you add up all these numbers, you're going to see that obviously it's going to add up to more than 27. The reason is because there are different modes that would be occurring in the same incident. For example, if you were verbally making fun of someone and simultaneously writing or making a gesture in the same bullying incident, that could be recorded in more than one way. That's why these numbers don't add up to 27. Similarly, the consequences and the things that happen with respect to these investigations also doesn't add up to 27. There's a lot of work and paperwork that goes into these investigations, and a lot of consequences follow from the investigations. And when I say consequences, I don't always mean disciplinary consequences. They could be consequences for both the offender and the alleged victim, or a confirmed victim, if you will, in these 27 cases. So in some cases, you'll see, yes, there are detentions or suspensions or loss of privileges, but sometimes we do other things. Obviously, we talk to parents quite a bit, and we provide counseling for the students as well as for the victims as well as the offenders. And in a lot of cases, outside groups are involved, maybe therapist referrals are done. A lot of work goes into these investigations and trying to make sure that we take care of the problem. One of the things that we often do with our HIV reports is we have follow-up that occurs in each of the confirmed incidences to make sure that things are okay with whatever children work off in that situation going forward. Check-ins do in the weeks and months following an incident. Okay, so this is a list of the types of trainings and programs that we try to do throughout the school year with both staff and students. It's not a comprehensive list, and I'm sure that there are some things missing from it because I couldn't get into a certain aspect of the reporting software where the administrators list the different things that they're doing. But I know from talking to them that this is some of what's included in that list. And as soon as the state forwards me their HIV ITP reports that I couldn't access, I'll post them on the district webpage under our HIV link so you can see a comprehensive list of the types of trainings that we do. But one of the things that you want to keep in mind about HIV is what really motivated it to begin with, and that was suicide prevention. So one of the things that we worked hard at last year was working with our staff to do an extra 2-hour training on suicide prevention. It was a video that all the staff had to watch and get a certificate for completion. I know because I did it, Sean did it, our staff did this. And it was a really nice presentation, so we were happy to be able to have all the staff do that last year. These are some more of the things. Each school has what's known as an SST, or a school safety team, and part of their function is to monitor these reports and make recommendations for how improvements can be made, and to look for any patterns that they might see. This is an annual comparison, so if you recall, all the statistics that I shared so far, remember, we're spring of 12-13 compared to spring of 13-14. If you look at the full school year in 12-13 compared to the full school year in 13-14, these are the figures. Total investigations compared to the number of confirmed incidents. Finally, we just heard an explanation a couple minutes ago about something called the HIV self-assessment or the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights self-assessment. These are the scores that we are submitting for each of the schools for the 13-14 school year, and it simply represents the school safety team's self-analysis of how well they're doing with training. And you'll notice that in each case, the scale is 78 points, and these are the scores that were submitted by the school safety teams in their self-assessment that the state will evaluate in comparison to the data that was submitted through the NJDOE Homeless Portal. And by the way, these are much better than they were in the first year of the self-assessment because we put a lot of work into improving, knowing what the self-assessment was after the first year. 12-13 was the first year that we had a self-assessment. It was the first year that they published the criteria. So once we had the rubric in hand, we were certainly able to understand better what it was that they were looking for us to accomplish. So that's it. That's the data for HIV and EBVRS. The third component that I need to report to you is a related component, and it is the Code of Conduct report for the complete school year from September through June last year. The Student Code of Conduct is a document that is published on our school district webpage as well as each school's individual webpage. On the district webpage, it's listed under parents and students, but each school has it on their webpages as well. And basically, it describes the code of student behavior, talking about things like dress code, cell phones, how we handle violations or violations of the Code of Conduct, It outlines consequences for infractions. However, those consequences do vary depending on the severity of the different violations and the investigations that are handled by the school administrators. So here are some statistics about the violations at Ridge. And the code of conduct violations at Ridge represent, in this case, dress code violations and cell phone violations. And then wherever there are other breakdowns for violations, they are categorized as follows: cheating and plagiarism, cutting detention, disruptive behavior, insubordination, being late, cutting class, inappropriate use of the computer network, being dishonest, getting into fights, harassment issues, that could be verbal, it typically is. Language misuse is typically profanity. Smoking, gambling, vandalism, some of the lesser offenses. Suspected use confirmed, theft, and truancy. The numbers in the parentheses represent how does this represent change from the 12-13 school year to the 13-14 school year. For consequences, there are many. This represents the documented consequences for those code of conduct violations at Ridge High School. A large number of detentions, being Saturday detentions, morning detentions, lunchtime detentions, afternoon detentions. Some suspensions are in the mix. Talking to students, writing assignments, loss of credit, community service, and other. And as you can see, we had significant decline in some of the consequences. When I spoke to Mr. Howard about that, he was pleased to say they had a really good year last year. So hopefully we see that continuing. William N., the data is reported in a similar way from our student management system. We're able to run these reports to take a look at the code of conduct violations at Annan as well. Disruptive behavior at the middle school, the big one. Similar consequences used at Annan. Saturday detentions and after-school detentions, some suspensions, talking to the students. Sometimes we suspend kids from the bus problems. And then, as you might imagine, the numbers go down quite a bit as we get into the younger aged students at the elementary schools, both because of their age as well as the fact that there are less students in each of the elementary schools. You see significantly smaller numbers for the kinds of violations that occur at Oak Street. There's Cedar Hill. Mount Prospect. And Liberty Corner. At the elementary schools, I didn't put numbers. The consequences are less frequent, but similar types of things were used at the elementary school, just in a more age-appropriate fashion. And that concludes the student code of conduct data as well. So for me, when I look at this data, there's a couple of things to share. One is what's going on with HIV and the number of investigations and confirmed issues between 12-13 and 13-14. So two things I need to do. You may know that October is Violence Prevention Month. We do a lot of meetings with students in October. We also have school safety team meetings in October, I need to meet with the principals and talk to them about this report, go through this report with them, get their feedback on code of conduct, ask for any changes that they might recommend that they think might be helpful so that we can implement that. But anecdotally, and speaking to them a little bit about this already, and having gone through every single HIV case in the last 48 hours just to read them to try to find for myself some patterns, to be honest with you, it sounds a little crazy, but on the one hand, I'm really, really pleased. And I know that sounds crazy. Why am I so pleased? It looks like these numbers have gone up a lot in the last couple years. Truthfully, the reason I'm happy about it is because the purpose of the HIV laws are to look, find, support, and help anything that might be leading down a bad road for a student's health and well-being, specifically with respect to suicide prevention. So the fact that we're documenting more, investigating more, to me means we're helping more kids, not through things that weren't already happening, just getting better at identifying and talking to students and trying to help them. When I look at all of the individual cases, I'm also happy in that, in the grand scheme of what I'm seeing, it's bad language. It's students talking inappropriately to one another, choosing some select words that are definitely inappropriate and should be dealt with. But the vast majority of those cases are not the kinds of things that have me really worried about an individual student's health. So that's the upside of it. I also asked for some reasons, in particular from Frank and Karen, anecdotally, what they're seeing. One of the things that we have seen in the last couple of years that have contributed to some of the increases is related to the internet, technology, access to information, and new ways to communicate have contributed to some of this increase. And we have students sometimes with issues too, that we're learning how better to work with the students on. So those are the things kind of anecdotally, but I do need to spend some more time with them and the school safety teams to see if there's anything else that we can do to try to deal with some of these numbers. Because from a reporting perspective, in my mind's eye, a lot of the issues don't necessarily require the kind of time and energy that go into these investigations from a paper writing standpoint. There's a lot of paper involved. And one of the things that we've learned over time in the last couple of years of implementing the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights and HIV has come from state reviews as well of how's it going out there in the field. And one of the tools that they're looking to give schools is for principals to make an initial determination as to whether or not the merits of the situation constitute the level of paperwork associated with formal HIV reporting. And I think that would be a really nice tool for principals to have at their disposal, because one of the things that's happened over time, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, is that the word bullying immediately triggers one of these all-out investigations. And when I read through what's going on in the vast majority of these investigations, I know that that's not necessary, and it alludes a little bit to what maybe you were implying earlier, Mr. Bernie, what my opinion was on that, was that most of what they're dealing with existed before, and now it's being categorized in a new way, which on the one hand, the pendulum's way out here in suicide prevention, and that's really good, because we're working really hard to make sure that there aren't underlying issues there. And on the other hand, it may be creating a lot of paperwork that isn't really necessary. So I think maybe there's a balance somewhere that hasn't been struck yet, but that's where we are today. Thank you.
Well, I asked Karen to give me some feedback about that, and I do want to spend some more time with her. But the two things that she identified, we're working really hard to keep students in district, regardless of some of the behavioral issues that may be occurring. And that is a contributing factor, as well as the cyberbullying issues. Those are the two things that she cited.
And then the other number that jumped at me in a positive way was it looked like at Ridge, the number of parties and cutting classes went down significantly. What are we doing right?
Well, I didn't get a chance to talk to Frank about that one, but I am curious, and the first thing that jumped out to me was just the vast reduction in the number of detentions and Saturday detentions, which is probably related to less lates. And the only thing that he was able to share with me were two things. One was that he felt like the school climate was really good. Kids were being really positive last year. He thought that it was an excellent year for the students in general. And he said that they had gotten used to the cell phone rules as well, and that it used to be a major issue for them dealing with cell phone issues that created a lot of consequences for students, and that had also gone way down. Those were the two things that he shared. Sure. Okay.
Now we are up to item 10, which is public forum on agenda items. If you have something that you'd like to say about an item on the agenda, please come up and put your name and address on the clipboard.
More of a question of what I just saw. Like, maybe it's clear if you've got more background information, but this year's class, according to him, her behavior for last year, and yet he's telling the superintendent of schools that last year's behavior was great. So I'm very confused.
Is there anyone else for public comment? Good, I'd like to close public comment. We are up to approval of minutes. Would someone like to make a motion? Preeti? Susan, second. Need a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrd?
Yes?
Mrs. Swerner?
Abstain on the August dates, yes for September.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mrs. Cassell?
Yeah.
Mrs. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McKee?
Yes. We're up to committee reports. We have finance. I think there are 24 items under finance. Someone like to make a motion?
I'd like to move items 1 through 25, I believe.
25, sorry, 25. Karen, second. Elaine, did you have anything on this one?
Let me see, we met last Thursday, and what you see on the agenda, one of the items I've noted is, I think it's item 25 on this, or 24, just double check number, but it's the one dealing with the bond refunding. That's really something that we've done recently in the last couple of years, and it's basically like refinancing your house. Basically, we can take advantage of improvements in be able to lower our interest on our debt. And we're required by law to do it when I think the differential is 3%. If we will save 3% of the value of the bonds being refunded, we're required to do it. So we're getting to a point where we think we should be able to do that with an issue, a 2007 issue of the bonds. We'd be able to refund $5,855,000 of that amount. What we'd be doing tonight is just saying that we have an interest in doing this. The next step in the process would be to find an opportunity to sell the bonds, and this would be done by our Mary Lyons, who's our advisor on this, and we also have bond counsel involved. One of the other things to note about this is that as we would do it, all the fees would also be covered through it, so it wouldn't cost us. The only cost that we'd incur would be that we need to advertise a public hearing on the issue, and so that would be minimal advertisement there, and it would be, and then so once we decide to do this, if we pass this tonight, we would then have the council would have to find the right opportunity to sell the bonds, and that we would have to vote again to approve, and we would have a hearing on it so the public could comment. So that's the first thing. We also got an update on the Ridge High School and Cedar Hill HVAC projects, and we talked about that quite a bit in our last meeting, so I don't know if we want to spend more time talking about it today, but really what we're doing is we're replacing the unit ventilators, which are the heating units in each of the classrooms. These are all about 50 years old. We're looking forward to that project starting. One of the concerns that was asked was how much is it going to cost now that we're adding now that we're adding air conditioning to the units, because it's going to cost us perhaps more to operate on an annual basis. But we had a consultant look into that, and he did a modeling of how the buildings would work to simulate the operation of the new systems. And we got a PowerPoint which we shared with the rest of the board, which shows that the annual energy costs associated with the air conditioning at both buildings would be a total of $13,000, which is really not all that much in and of itself. And we recently completed a direct install lighting project at Oak Street School, under which PSE&G paid 80% of the cost, which is now saving us $13,951 a year. So basically, the two projects would cancel each other out, and we wouldn't be incurring as a board any additional costs. The next item we discussed was the trip for the supervisor of world languages to China, and this was a professional development expense. You'll see this as I think it's item 4 on it been moved? But yes, it's item 4 on the finance agenda tonight. This is a $700 cost. One thing we looked at was, if you notice, this is in line with the amount of cost that we spend regularly for other professional development. And it's as far as the government of China is paying for most of the cost of this trip. One of the things we asked for when we discussed this at the last meeting was to get some more information about what the goals of the trip were and links about how our school district would benefit from this trip. We were given quite a bit of information, which I passed along to the board in the minutes. The information showed that Rutgers University coordinator of the trip sent a letter in which he explained those goals of the trip to us. And among the benefits would be for our supervisor to visit Chinese schools, establish contacts and network with other American educators who work at schools with established and developing Mandarin programs, and learn about the best practices for starting a Mandarin program here. So that, we talked about that. With the rest of the agenda items, items 1 through 3 are standard items, including line item transfers, secretary's report. The others are also, a number of them are also standard. 8 through 21 are approvals of tuition and related services for special education students. Only 2 of those are new placements. Item 6 is approval of disposal of equipment and books. Item 7 is approval of a lunch contract for students attending Lord Sterling School, which is a special education placement. Item 22 is a good one. It's a change order associated with the bridge driveway project, which will result in a net credit to the district of $2,396. And item 23 is an approval of transportation contract for students attending the Midland School. And then item 24 is the bond financing resolution that we discussed above. And then I think, and I hope we haven't changed the numbers on these since our meeting, because I could be all wrong numbers. But anyway, as I just realized I'm reading them out. The final one is a approval of a contract with Somerset County VOTEC, under which we will pay $15,200 for all of our students to attend there. This is a new cost as before. Yeah, well, the only concern is it's a new cost. The county had not previously required us to spend any money, so whenever you're at a new cost, the concern is that it'll be a little bit bigger next time. But anyway, it is a huge cost right now. So, and then the committee reviewed our budget and saw, with respect to where we are now as far as being on target, and I think we looked at our available balance and our expenses. Any questions? Mike?
I have some comments. The HVAC and the unit ventilator, I just wanted to give a little bit different summary of it. Maybe I have a question. Our costs for the 2 projects for just the 2 schools is $1.6 million. Our cost for the air conditioning is $650,000. I think the unit ventilators are probably something that had to be replaced. The air conditioning, I don't think would be the highest item on our capital expense budget, but because we are getting aid of roughly $400,000, maybe we can afford the $600,000 in addition for a total cost of $1 million. I don't know. Amazingly, the cost of the air conditioning was not too high, and the fellow did a wonderful job of analysis. And I think it's about $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 per school to air conditioning. These are 2 schools, so we have 3 more plus our prospect.
It's 13 for 2 schools. Yeah.
So we have some more schools coming. I don't think Mount Prospect requires the air conditioning. I think the other 3 do, if they're in line. We've got another $500,000 or more, probably more, to add in. So we're going to put $1 million plus, maybe even $2 million into the air conditioning project, even though we're getting assistance. So I just wanted to surface those numbers. It's a lot of money. I don't think it would have been on the capital list if we had not gotten the aid. I wanted to ask you about the lighting. 80% of the public service electric and gas funded, 20% wasn't. The savings on the lighting bill paying for the air conditioning, does it also pay at the same time for the additional lighting costs?
I remember there's a phase in that, so the air conditioning cost would not begin until really the work gets done next summer. You're not going to use it during the summer. You're really going to use it in the spring of 16, at which point the payback will have occurred on the Oak Street lighting. And at that point, that's where the offset savings then kick into the Oak Street lighting. They're the districts and they offset the cost of the air conditioning on the two buildings.
The next item I wanted to comment on was the budget.
Yeah, can I just respond on the one thing I wanted to make, and that you made me think of it, but I did want to point out, which I don't think I said clearly, is that the state is going to pay for 40% of the costs of the unit ventilators, which is a huge benefit to us. And then also, I do believe that air conditioning is important for the students, especially when they're taking testing in the spring. You know, if you're uncomfortable in your classroom, it just doesn't help the way you think. We have people with asthma. We want good air for the students, and it's something that I think is important. And also, I don't think it would be it's very difficult to find unit ventilators without air conditioning because it's sort of the standard now to have air conditioning in these units. And then also, I think I could say that all classrooms at Cedar Hill and Ridge will be air conditioned at the completion of this project, which I think is a good goal.
Just commenting, the numbers I gave was just the air conditioning piece. And the total project for both of them is $2.7 million, and we're being asked to pay $1.6 million. And of the $1.6 million that we're going to have to pay, $650,000 for those two schools for the air conditioning. I don't know how I feel about that. I want to talk about the budget. A wonderful addition. We used to talk years ago of the budget. We haven't been doing it too recently because we don't vote on it anymore. And I think that was a super job. We're spending a little more than we anticipated. We're bringing in a little more than we anticipated. And I think this was a tremendous addition, I think. And if you haven't received a copy of this, the other board members might want to ask for a copy, even though I have a ton of questions. But
I think it's a good copy. Yeah, you got it.
I think it is a great addition. I don't know whether you want to talk about the China trip here or not, but I do. So, I have no problem with Mandarin language being taught. China is rapidly becoming a world power. I have no question at all. But when we start talking a little bit about going to learn about the culture, I have to qualify things a little bit. It is a communist country. Number two, they are supporting the Northern Korean maniac. So there's another culture that we had where we delved into culture a little bit, and that was into South America and the Spanish language, and we got into sins of Padre Amaro. And I think that was a push. So culture, I'm having a little trouble with because I agree with Mandarin, but I don't know whether we want to know too much about the culture. It's a communist country. Their submarines are now, according to the Wall Street Journal, or maybe the Treasury Report, off the, or claimed to be off the coast of California. These are atomic submarines, and they no doubt have weapons on them. The good news is, and I'm dating again a couple of weeks ago, China created 40,000 new million. It's wonderful. But then I read another article, and it says the rich are very unhappy in China because the money's being taken away. They won't leave. It's not a culture that I think is healthy for our students, and I don't think it's one that we want to implement any more than the one that we had out of Latin America. I think that was a problem. And so I think the language is very very, very important. They are no question going to be world leaders sometime in the future, or at least major, major force in the world. But I'm not so sure going and learning from a government agency what their culture is has any truth in it at all, or any merit. I think the important thing for our students is to learn the language. So those are my 2 cents on
I have
the challenge.
a question. It seems to me number 4 is now completely, I want to clarify, what exactly is number 4? Is that the entire annual budget, or is that this particular trip for the one month? Or two? What?
Oh, there's three different professional development.
I'm looking at the red page, sorry. So we're going to vote on it separately. Okay. Linda?
Yeah, I just have a question. With the Somerset County Vocational and Technical Schools, how many students were there?
I think we said it was like 13, 15, something like that.
Around 1,000, give or take.
And has that been pretty consistent? Is it going up? Is it going down? It's going up a little bit.
I think it represents students who go there full-time, and then some students go for morning or afternoon. It's not
I know
consistent.
some students don't go there.
Yeah.
I have a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank Mrs. Kusel for explaining bond refunding in the minutes in a way where I actually understood it. So thank you for that. And regarding the administrator trip to China, it's my understanding, based on some conversations we've had, that in addition to being exposed to the Chinese culture, it's actually a program in place through the Rutgers Institute, which is one of the leading Chinese educational institutions in the U.S., of how to develop and implement a successful Chinese language program in your district. So our administrator will be getting information on developing and delivering a Chinese curriculum, in addition to networking with other educators who are either thinking of doing it or are in the process of doing it or have done it already, as well as networking with the people associated with the Rutgers Institute who potentially have great teachers that we can hire when we're ready to do it. So it's more than just Chinese culture. It's about education of the Chinese language and networking and getting all the resources together to develop the best possible program should we put it in place. That's my understanding.
I don't think you have to go to China to do it. I think the Rutgers program is probably good.
The Rutgers is sponsoring this program. And I guess one thing that I think made a difference to some of us who consider the issue is that it's $700 out of our pocket to pay for this, and you look at it, it's really in line with other half-day programs that people go to for a variety of items. For me, it comes down to the fact that if we're going to implement Mandarin, and we haven't at all decided that we might, I'd like to have as much information as possible, as Bev said, to create the best program we possibly can. So if for $700 we can get more information, even if it's how much more, I would want it, because it's we certainly don't want to implement a program with holes in it if we could have done it differently. So those are my thoughts.
My view is not whether we can teach Mandarin. My view is that I don't want the kids poisoned with lies about a country that's notorious for what they're doing. And I don't think it's healthy to impart that to the children. I think the language is wonderful, but I don't think you can get a true picture of China when you go there in the government-sponsored program. I worry about our kids getting poisoned, so that's...
If I may respond to that, I'm not worried because I think our teachers and our future teachers know the difference between educating students on a culture versus swaying them with political positions and propaganda. And I think part of our job, and one of the reasons why we need to develop the best curriculum possible, is we want them to learn the language and the culture from a historical and current perspective without swaying them in a political way.
A great example of that not working is the sense of Papa-Amaro.
Yeah, that happened years ago, Michael, and we've corrected the problem.
But it was the culture that they were reflecting. And
not to discount the value of any other professional development we might send someone on. I just have to point out, it's not just $770 that it costs the district, because there's days of work not occurring here in Basking Ridge while that trip takes place. And while I can see the value in it, that is not something that I take lightly.
Anyone else have any questions or comments on finance items? Give a roll call, please.
Mr. Burr?
I'm going to vote no on the China trip. And are we voting on the, I don't think we are we voting on the air conditioning and the
No.
ventilators?
No.
So I'll vote yes on the
Mrs. Squire?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mrs. Cassell?
Yes.
Mrs. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Richard?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
I'll vote no on the China trip. I think the networking that can be available through the Rutgers Institute can be done without going to China. Also, there's 4 days of administrative time that is lost. And the research that can be done and understanding development of the programs can be done by evaluating programs.
Great, we're just voting now, we haven't already had discussion, okay?
So, say no to number 4, yes to everything else. No to the China trip, yes to everything else.
Mrs. Baldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McHugh?
Yes. Okay, we're up to personnel. Somebody want to make a motion? Bev?
I move items 1 through 17, I believe.
Someone second? Susan? Thank you.
I think 1 through 17 are fairly standard personnel items. There were a couple that were noted in the minutes that you all should have received over the weekend. And once we've voted on these items, I would also want to report out to the public on a few other items that we discussed in personnel. Any questions on 1 through 17?
Just on number 4, I think there's a typo unless it was corrected subsequent to this printing. In the second to last line, it says June 6, 2014, and I believe that's supposed to say 2015.
Could you just summarize the type of things too that are covered here? This is people on maternity leave, what are the types of things?
Yeah, resignation, extracurricular assignment, child care leave, let's see, change of assignments, appointments, extracurricular assignments, teacher mentors, staff college instructional assignments, coaching assignments, approving substitute teachers, and the hiring of 1 new teacher from a last-minute resignation at the end of the summer.
Thanks.
Any other questions before we vote? Then I will do the committee report. Give a roll call, please.
Mr. Burr?
Yes?
Mrs. Squire?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mrs. Cassell?
Yes.
Mrs. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Baldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McHugh?
Yes. Bev?
All right. I'm going to report out on 3 agenda items from our meeting we met last Wednesday. The first one is to remind everyone we are in the last year of our administrative contract, the BTAA contract. Mr. Markarian has already reached out to begin the process of negotiations with the team. They will probably start in January or February as our first meeting. The second item is the potential hiring of a junior engineer on staff to oversee summer construction projects as well as work with our district throughout the year. I think the impetus was the complex HVAC project that we're hoping to get done at It would be budget neutral because the salary we would be providing to this on-staff engineer would be coming out of money that's currently in the Aramark contract. Additionally, which was detailed in the notes for Mr. McLaughlin attached to the minutes, there's over $900,000 of money projected to be spent on supplemental engineering consulting services. And Mr. McLaughlin has indicated that at least half of this money conservatively could be saved by having an on-staff engineer doing that engineering work instead. There's lots of other benefits for having someone on staff. Once the HVAC goes in, it needs to be maintained. We have not proactively come up with an equipment inventory and projected lifespans of some of our equipment. We could do that. Based on all these facts, the Personnel Committee unanimously recommends that we look into hiring this position. Okay. And finally, we had a discussion about our committee priorities for the upcoming year. Number one is clearly getting the BTAA contract negotiated. Our second priority was a proactive staffing analysis, meaning if we have money to add staff, where will we add it regardless of what is being lobbied to the board? We tend to react when parent groups have a concern about this issue or that issue. We'd really like to step back and say, just from an overall perspective, where would we add staff if we could add staff? And of course, this is not something that personnel would do in a bubble. It would have to be done in conjunction with the Finance and the Curriculum Committee. And finally, our third priority would be in the spring after our BTAA contract is negotiated. We need to start thinking about our BTEA contract, which will be up for negotiation the following year.
Anyone have any questions?
The junior engineer, $400,000, is that a couple of years? That's quite a savings.
Right, it's over a period, probably 4.
And if you noted in the
There's
minutes,
commissioning costs included too, so we wouldn't be able to avoid commissioning costs in the system. It's a regular commissioning.
we noted in the minutes that the committee would like a one-year follow-up. Should we go forward with this hire, we'd like to revisit it in a year and actually have itemized savings on paper to see if it actually came to fruition.
The weight room experience, we really made a mess of that, and so more engineering might make sense.
Well, Mr. Markarian gave a really good example of how this kind of work helps. At Ridge High School in the music room, there are currently 2 self-contained lesson booths that are not being used a lot and they're needed for storage. In the past, Aramark would have been asked to go in, rip everything out of those rooms so we could use them for storage, losing everything that's in the room. Because we brought Mr. Harding in on staff as our own facilities manager, not an Aramark employee, he's supervising this process and they're actually removing the equipment so it can be repurposed for other uses in the district. So we're not just throwing stuff away, we're going to reuse it. And those kind of efficiencies will double or more if we have 2 on-staff people looking at these things. And the list is endless. Mr. Harding can't currently get to, half of what's on his list.
What's amazing is we've gone from 0 engineering to suddenly, and I'm not arguing with that, I want to better understand it. What are other districts doing? I'd like to get some flavor, and I'm not looking for an answer today, but I'd like to know what some of our other districts, are they also getting into engineering staff?
Well, they have most other districts have a traditional facilities manager who probably came up through the maintenance ranks and holds a certified facilities manager certificate, which requires a course study that's offered by Rutgers, but it's really very cursory. It really focuses on a lot of the compliance requirements, and Mr. Harding is in the process of obtaining that. They don't really have people that have an engineering background. My initial thinking in recommending this to the Personnel Committee with this hiring 2 years ago was that in looking at what's done in the corporate sector, when you look at what types of expertise they look for with their facilities management, it's often someone with mechanical or civil or electrical
their salaries are budget neutral to begin with because it's money that's being pulled out of the current Aramark contract. So that potential $400,000 of savings is above and beyond the salary that's already covered.
So you're really eating into the architecture fee. And the supervisory fee of the construction manager. Interesting.
So we're ready to move on? Okay, we're up to curriculum. There's one item under curriculum. Someone like to make a motion, and once you got first, before we move to the career report.
I'd like to move item 1, the curriculum.
Bev, second. Take the roll call.
Could we
Sorry.
explain what genetic principles and issues are? Is this tracing mankind through evolution? What is this course?
Well, this course has been at Ridge for a long time, and actually it was substantially rewritten over the summer to modernize the class and make it more engaging for 11th and 12th grade students who are not taking AP science courses.
And what's it about?
It's about genetics.
Well, that's what I want to know.
Well, I don't know the exact syllabus of the course, but I assume that it probably covers some of the same material that's covered in 9th grade biology and AP biology, but in more depth.
The only genetics book that I remember reading was following the different migrations out of Africa to the rest of the world. And with the Ice Age, some of them went east, and some of them slowed down. And I think genetically they can now trace the timing and the path that the different groups take. So if you take a person in Japan, you can say, gee, they left Africa at such and such a time. Is that what it is?
Well, I expect it's broader than that. I expect it probably covers Mendelian genetics, which is inheritance of traits in both plants and animals as well as people. And it probably covers
It's not just
someone.
human.
No, I wouldn't think so. As I said, I'm not that familiar with the syllabus, but that's what I would imagine. So this is a new textbook to support the modernized course.
Okay, you can look at the textbook. If you're interested. So, let's go to the textbook.
Curious.
May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Burr,
Yes.
Mrs. Swarner,
Yes.
Mrs. Craig,
Yes.
Mrs. Cassell,
Yes.
Mrs. McGowan,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Mrs. Waldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McHugh.
Yes. Linda, do you want to do a committee report?
Yes.
Curriculum?
So the curriculum committee had its first meeting on September 12th. So it was our first meeting since June. And it was, it was a really, really packed agenda. So the first part of the meeting, we heard presentations on all of the summer curriculum writing that was done in all of the core subjects. So I'd first like to run through that. In the area of science and technology, the New Jersey State Board of Education recently adopted the Next Generation Science Standards, which are national science standards. The new standards have an increased focus on scientific practice as opposed to just memorizing facts. So all of the curriculum revisions in science classes reflect that. So that includes the genetics course at Ridge. CP Mathematical Physics was revised to focus on practice standards, and AP Physics C, which is the second year of AP Physics at Ridge, was revised to incorporate more inquiry-based lab activities. In mathematics, in K through 5, the math curriculum was revised to focus on multi-step critical thinking questions and to ensure readiness for PARCC testing. In grades 6 through 8, practically every course at William Annan, every math course at William Annan was modified based on feedback from this past school year, 2013 to 14, which was the first year of the new curriculum. the new math curriculum. At Ridge, several math courses were revised, including senior math topics, Algebra 1 seminar, Geometry seminar, and an Algebra 2 seminar course was created. In English Language Arts, in grades K through 2, the second grade teachers receive training in word study, which includes phonics and spelling, and the summer curriculum writing lessons and assessments for word study were created. So in grades 3 through 9, most of the curriculum revision focused on preparing students for the PARCC testing, and some changes were made to the reading lists. In special education, K through 8, lessons and activities were created for the social skills class given at William Annan. And in K through 5, materials were created to improve vocabulary instruction. In social studies, all the social studies programs and courses are now fully aligned with the 2009 New Jersey Social Studies Standards. And Kristen Fox, the social studies supervisor, pointed out that the new 2014 New Jersey social studies are basically the same as the 2009 social studies, so we're basically caught up. In grade 8, Global History 1, it was the course was revised after the first year that it was taught. And in Global History 2, the curriculum for Global History 2 was finalized over the summer, and it's being taught for the first time this school year. AP US History, there's a new AP exam this coming May 2015, and there's a new textbook. AP Microeconomics and Personal Finance, this is a new course being offered this fall. There currently are 66 students enrolled. The Personal Finance is going to be project-based and will be done after the AP exam is over. In World Languages, the grades 6 through 8 and level 1 courses were all revised. Thematic units were created and summative assessments were created. There's a new course being taught at Ridge called Francophone Culture and Society. There are currently 27 students in the class. Let's see. In Fine and Practical Arts, the K through 5 art curriculum was revised for the first time since the summer of 2007. The new curriculum has fewer units because the previous version had too many units for the time available. Technical Theater and Design Construction is a new course at Ridge. It will be offered next year, 2015 to 2016. The Theater 2 course was revised. All the technology, education, and business courses are being evaluated, and the plan is to modernize them. So that was pretty much the end of the summer curriculum writing, other than health, which is a separate agenda item I'll come to a little bit later. Brian Heineman talked a bit about the Gifted and Talented program. We now have 2 gifted and talented teachers at the elementary schools, David Persili at Oak Street and Cedar Hill, and Kelly Linstra at Liberty Corner and Mount Prospect. And both of these teachers had been classroom teachers, elementary classroom teachers in the district. Brian also reported that several software products were researched over the summer, and the best one is Redbird, which is an offshoot of Stanford University's EPGY program. It's web-based and has a capstone project, and a representative from Redbird is coming back to the district in October. There is a Gifted and Talented Frequently Asked Questions document. It's posted on the Curriculum and Instruction section of the district website under Curriculum and Instruction Resources. All the students that were identified last year will stay in the Gifted and Talented program, and additional students will be tested and added this year. The 2 gifted and talented teachers will now deliver Continental Math League during the school day in each elementary school building. Continental Math League runs from November through March. The math enrichment binders, which were new last year for K through 5, were revised to ensure that all materials were at the appropriate grade level, and new capstone tasks were added. The curriculum department, that new this year, is publishing a newsletter for parents 4 times per year. The first newsletter was in the September 19th District Friday folder. Athletic Director Rich Shello talked about the summer work that was done for the drug and alcohol curriculum. During the summer, a committee consisting of student assistants, counselors, and health teachers from William Annan and Ridge revised the health curriculum in grades 6 through 12 in the area of alcohol, tobacco, and drug education, and recommended the purchase of some additional materials for use at William Annan and Ridge. The committee also created a document called Summary of ATOD Education Prevention and Intervention Programming, which is posted on the Burns BOE website. It's in the Parents and Students section under Health and Medical. Mr. Heineman also gave an assessment update. As everyone knows by now, quarterlies at Ridge have been eliminated for this school year. The standard 9-period bell schedule will be in place for all 4 marking periods. Implementation of common assessments is in progress, and end-of-year summative assessments have been proposed for 9th grade social studies, 10th and 11th grade science and social studies, and 12th grade language arts and CP calculus. Students in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade will be taking PARCC exams in language arts and mathematics. Kristen Wolf, the mathematics supervisor, reported on the Algebra 1 summer program. 27 students took the Algebra 1 summer course, which was new this summer, and 18 of those students moved on to 8th grade geometry. Also new for the 2014-15 school year, proficiency exams are required for students in CP geometry to qualify for honors algebra 2, and for students in CP algebra 2 to qualify for honors pre-calculus. And the proficiency exams were offered during the summer. So let's see. For the students that took the proficiency exam for honors algebra 2, 66 students took the exam and 17 students were admitted into honors algebra 2. And then for the honors pre-calc proficiency exam, 23 students took the exam and 7 students were qualified to take honors pre-calc. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. I think we shared an email about this. But with regard to the 66 students who took the proficiency exam for honors algebra 2, I'd like to see as much detail as was provided for the 23 students as to what the different reasons were. She specifically mentioned that some were attempting to accelerate, others were planning to stay in the honors track. It's a significant number of students, 66, and I'm wondering what we're doing right or wrong that we only ended up with 17. If it's a case that they were all trying to accelerate, it's not an issue, but if not, I'd like to see that detail for that. And I also have the other question I think I inquired about. The absence of a pre-calculus end-of-year assessment struck me as odd, given the fact that if you are in pre-calculus as a junior, you're not taking the math PARCC exam. So I'm just wondering if that is something that's going to remain that way, or if at some point, or I'm just curious about it.
And I believe I have forwarded emails to you on both of those questions.
Did you send me one?
I did.
I'm so sorry, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can resend it.
I got one from Brian, but,
Okay, I also forwarded one from Mr. Wolf.
okay, I didn't get that.
Yes, so I can resend it.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. We are up to policy, which I don't think was met yet. Monday. Okay, policy meeting on Monday. And advocacy met last week. We had our meeting with the PTO presidents. At that meeting, Nick gave a beginning of school update, just some of the stuff that we've already heard about, the enrollment numbers for the beginning of school, the construction projects that happened over the summer, the curriculum projects that happened over the summer, which Linda just talked about. And he told them, what else did he tell them? I'll get to the other stuff in a minute, but Brian updated them about the curriculum newsletter that was going out, and he also got feedback about the idea of discontinuing the district curriculum committee and replacing it with forums, which would be open to the public, so parents can come and hear about curriculum in the district and ask questions. The district curriculum committee has been around for years, and there were 2 representatives from each school that sit on that committee and report back to at the PTO meetings, or sometimes in the newsletters. I remember in the past, updates about what was going on in the district. Sometimes that was more or less successful in terms of the updates that went back to the schools. And so he had the idea of having these forums where there could be different topics, like the one that he's doing at Mount Prospect about gifted and talented. But if we make it clear to people that these forums are happening, and they could be at different, there could be ones for the middle or high school, there could be ones for the elementary, or some that are general for the whole district, depending on the topic. The PTO president seemed very receptive to that idea, so it sounds like we're going to be trying that this year. We gave an update to the PTO presidents on progress on drug and alcohol issues. Nick updated them that in terms of the voluntary random drug testing, that the nurses' offices are in the process of getting certified to be a testing facility. It takes a while, and there's paperwork and everything to be done, so everything's getting done as quickly as possible there. And he gave an update on the curriculum writing, drugs and alcohol that went over the summer. We also talked about the Safe Homes initiative that the Parents for Substance-Free Kids group is working on. And there will be something going out in the Friday folder about that pretty soon, I think. And I think we talked about that here last year. Safe Homes is the program where parents can sign up to take a pledge that they will not serve drugs or alcohol in their home. And then there is a list maintained where you can go on there and look and see where your kids are going, or is the family on that list. So it's a tool that parents can use. Anyway, let's see. Nick and Chris Barone gave an update on the Chromebooks that they were delivered to the schools. They're getting everything installed on them and set up in the next couple of weeks. Nick also talked about the staff training that went on for the staff in service day before school started about Google and the Chromebooks, and getting everyone ready to use them right away. PTO presidents were happy to hear about all the different ways that the Chromebooks are going to be used year-round. There were some concerns that they were donating all this money for Chromebooks and wanted to make sure that they were going to be used not just for park testing, which is understandable. So they seemed very happy to hear about all the different projects and things that the teachers are planning on using them for year-round. And Nick also gave an update on the status of the broadband projects, which we've already talked about tonight, to the PTO presidents. Let's see. I think the rest of the stuff in the minutes was just kind of business stuff. We talked a little bit about public relations in our committee meeting and finding ways that the district could get more news out to the public about things, accomplishments. We try to invite people to board meetings, we invite students, and we can't get everybody here. There's so many things going on in the district, so many students doing so many things. So we're trying to look for alternate ways to get good news out when students and staff members have accomplishments and when there's exciting things to talk about in the district. So, does anyone have any questions about the minutes? Yeah.
Actually, can I just make a comment about curriculum? I should have done it earlier. Am I allowed to back? It's a nice one. Okay. It's Brian Reineman or Nick, I don't know whose idea it was to write that in the Friday folder about the different.
The newsletter?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea,
Yeah.
because then it is only one-way information, but if parents have questions they can ask, they're more aware and an opportunity to know what's happening. So whoever had the idea, at least I'd like to say kudos to them.
Any other questions about advocacy? Are there any liaison reports this time? Okay, so we are now up to public forum on other than agenda items. If anyone has something they would like to say, please come up and give us your name and address. It's okay.
Just wanted to comment about the when we were all like engrossed in the quarterlies, although I thought, there was serious issues with that, the one good thing about it was you would get the information and you'd be able to self-correct. And that would benefit the students who were in the class at the time. So whatever, if it's something that the teachers are going to gain by doing it, it's not going to help us. The kids will be gone. And I also learned when we had all those exams, I learned how problematic they are. And one specific example I could give is in English, honors English exactly. They, extremely talented teacher gave a quarterly exam, got the results and said, oh, wow. And what she did is she gave a consensus exam, which when everyone's taking it together and the teacher's helping, of course they're going to get 100. And then when you average the 100 with the really bad grade, it kind of looks like they did fine. But the truth is, they didn't do fine. And they didn't know that stuff. So if that's in a final, kids are going to be gone. So what are we going to do about that? And the other idea or thing that I kind of learned was some teachers were very reasonable and they wanted the kids to be, I'm going to say, successful. And what I mean by that is some teachers, there was a situation where teacher who I knew said, all of my students ended up in the B range except for one for this particular marking period, but I feel fine that the average on the quarterly was a C. And I felt like that was so inconsistent. If, we kind of wanted to go with the idea of you're going to do better on the quarterly than you did on, say, the final and midterms, then I know we can't tell the teachers what to do, of course, but I think we kind of have to be on the same page with what are we trying to do? Are we trying to come in where kids are performing at where they had performed all year, or you're fine, they perform a grade lower? And I just don't know how you do that when you give it the last week of school. So I really am concerned. And although I don't have a junior, I feel very badly for the juniors. And because I want to advocate for everyone, and no one else is here, I want to just say that they've had it really tough. They had quarterlies that were crazy first year, quarterlies that were even crazier second year, and now they're going to have an end of the year exam. So I just hope that when we go to figure all this out, we consider a lot of these elements and also don't heavily weight it so that you don't hurt these kids who are applying to college and have no recourse at that point because the damage will be done. So if they're going to, I don't mind them learning how to take a final for college, but the other thing I was going to add was that in my daughter's college, Bucknell, very few teachers give a final exam. They have projects, they have Socratic seminars, other mechanisms for an end of year thing. So what are we preparing them for? I don't know. They're studying for SATs, they're studying for APs, they're studying for all these things. I'm just not sure what we're shooting for. So I hope we consider all of those things.
I'm Lauren Salvo from Intercourt, and I shared with Mr. Malika, the superintendent, Mr. Markarian, and some board members an email that I had sent out saying, I'm not sure if you received it because I did send it this afternoon, and my concern is the security. Oh, great, thank you. Sometimes I'm not sure what the Apple calendar gets filtered out. The security at Cedar Hill Elementary School. I'm very thankful for you, the board, our educators, and everyone who helps support our youngsters in the school district. It's a wonderful job. I had experience being a teacher for 10 years. I worked in a variety of elementary schools, so I'm aware of school security and how I think we can better our school district. If you had read the letter, I explained my first experience at Cedar Hill Elementary School last spring was very overwhelming, and I left with a sense of fear for my daughter. The school security system is relaxed and outdated. When I entered the school, another parent held the door open for me, and I was not buzzed in. I was not required to sign in as a visitor. I roamed the school looking for the gym. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't like the feeling that I was sending my kindergartner to school for the upcoming school year, custodians, and office staff do not have the layers of security to protect them as they work hard every day for our youngsters. To my knowledge, the security measures that exist at Cedar Hill School are the outdoor camera system and the locked main doors. Due to the structure of the building, it's an older building, so it doesn't allow you to implement right now a double door system where you're forced to enter a second door and that pushes you into the office, where then you're forced to sign in. It just doesn't exist there. So if we can get that on-site engineer and possibly he or she can develop something where construction would need to happen in the school in order to make it safer and add layers of protection. Because we just don't want anyone easily getting into the school at night. And I was there just to help my child. Also, the office is a brick closet. I didn't even know it was the office. Like, you could think it's a classroom, you could walk right past it. Yes, I went and I looked and there were a few signs that said main office. But the office personnel can't see out. They can't see who's entering the school. If we could knock down part of the wall and on the two walls, put windows where they get easy access and look out to see possibly who's approaching the school. I know from the structure of the office, I don't think it's possible to do that right now, because I don't know if there's an office that would be one of the walls, but I feel like there's something we could do that might not cost a fortune to somehow protect our kids and allow there to be more transparency to see into the school and see out of the school. Those are my suggestions. I know it all costs money. It's construction. It's not something we can snap our fingers and fix, but I think it's something that we need to have discussions about and we need to fix. I don't know what happens in the other elementary schools. I haven't visited them yet. But in today's climate, we need to protect these kids. We need to protect our teachers, our administrators. We need to give them as much support as we can to help them from any awful outside forces that could be coming in, or even a custody issue. When I had such easy access on kindergarten screening day, or even when I went to the PTO meeting last week, I just walked in and I'm thinking, I don't have any custody issues, but what if somebody else did? And they could easily have access to their kids. It doesn't have to necessarily be a bad person coming into school and causing problems. So these are just some things that I saw that were disheartening to me because we moved to Basking Ridge. We heard these schools are excellent, and I couldn't wait to get my daughter in there. And that was my first experience thinking, oh my gosh, I can't wait for her to get off the school bus every day. I just want her home. I just want her safe. And I know she has excellent teachers, and I know she has a great staff at that school watching over her, but we need to protect her, and we need to protect them too. And there's something we have to do. So that is just what I'm here to share with you, and I hope it opens doors for discussion and for something more than people. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megan, Independence Drive. I want to say I think it's great, the initiative you're taking with the Safe Homes agenda and the list of the parents for alcohol and drug-free homes. I don't think we need to pat our backs too much though on this, because I have to say 100 years ago when I was in high school, we had that in my community, and they took it a step further, which I would encourage you to do as well, which was that the parents who had the safe homes not only took the pledge, but it was published in the local paper every month, which households agreed to have alcohol-free parties and drug-free homes. And it became quite the interesting social dynamic with parents within the community, because your best friend's name may not be on that list. It became a lot more transparent for everyone to see which families were and which families were not, rather than let's go look it up quietly somewhere where it's hidden. When it's up there on the list, it really pushes parents to make a decision and see where they truly stand and whether they're willing to put themselves out there and say, yes, my name is in the paper as being not a, yeah, it's kind of hidden there on the website somewhere, but nobody will know that we had kids over Friday night, we had some beer in the basement. I would just urge you to take it that step forward further, because that was done 50 years ago when we didn't have the problems that we have now. So I just urge you to take it even further than you are. got the C on the final exam, and so they didn't qualify to move up the next year? Or are these the kids whose parents want them in the honors track, and they'll, I think we need, as a public, to know who these kids are, because there's so much talk about this math curriculum in our community, and especially for the new parents in the community, and especially the people who are taking summer courses at Newark Academy and trying to push their kids forward. I think the community deserves to know what these numbers represent. And I don't know why when it was brought up to the board, why this is such a secret about, oh, I sent you the email. We want to know, too, not just you. We want to know who these numbers are and what's going on. And I don't think it should be kept from us.
Is there anyone else for public comment? Okay, I'll close public comment. We are, did you want to respond first before you go? Sure. Okay.
Okay, end of year summative exams. So we've been talking about this quite a bit in terms of the history, the evolution of midterms, finals, quarterlies. Where are we going? What are we thinking? So I can tell you what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking is that I think it's important that we try to understand what does really happen with students when they leave Ridge High School, and that we don't send them off with a gap if in fact they are experiencing things as college students that we're not preparing them for. I'm a little concerned about that issue. So what we're trying to do is gather some data on the students, the colleges that they're going to, what it is that they are studying in terms of their majors, and what kind of information can we get from the colleges that might represent a little bit about the kinds of assessments that the students are being asked to do. I don't know that we're going to be able to get actual assessments, but I'm going so far as to see if we can ask, if we can get a hold of the right people and try to get some real examples of what the students are being asked to do on their exams. Anecdotally, I've heard all kinds of things from project types of assessments that students might be doing, and that may be related in large part to the type of major that the students are choosing at their college. So I think we all have our own experiences that we remember from college, and I'm just concerned that if we have no exam, end-of-year type assessment of some variety that gives the student some experience of preparing for a body of knowledge or a body of material, that we might be doing the kids a disservice. But at the same time, we want to be sensitive to the amount of work, the scheduling at the high school, the amount of regular instructional time that is lost when trying to deal with implementing significant assessments, the stress of how much that assessment might be worth for a student. So what we've talked about at the curriculum committee, and what we talked about briefly here tonight, was the idea of not weighting any of these tests, these common assessments, or for that matter, any of the end-of-year assessments, any more than a regular test, or creating any kind of convoluted schedule in order to have those assessments. In terms of what's the value, we hoped that the value is to create an experience for the students that does prepare them for the type of assessment that they may see at the next level. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to try to get a better handle on exactly what types of assessments they are seeing. So that's a lot of kind of legwork, talking to or surveying students if they're willing to respond, students who are graduates of Ridge and have declared majors somewhere to try to gather that kind of information. So it'll be a little bit of a process, I think, in trying to find that information out. But that's the thinking behind it at this stage of the game. As far as security in the schools go, I don't think there was anything that was raised that we haven't had some discussions about at various points or another, and even received proposals about from various consultants about the cost of doing exactly the type of modifications to some of our buildings that we haven't already discussed, that we've looked at. It is a construction cost, it's a significant cost, and it's really something that the board just needs to kind of think about in terms of, do we want to spend that kind of money and go down that road? And the math placement exams, I'm curious myself, so I'm certain that we can talk a little bit more about that. If you were talking about that at the curriculum committee, I remember that I had to deal with something that came up in the middle of that. So I know I might have missed a piece of that. I apologize for that, but there's no secret. I'd be curious myself to understand a little bit more about that. Certainly we can share whatever information we can find. I can talk to Kristen a little bit about that. We can share.
Yeah, I didn't discuss the numbers because I don't have them with me.
So we'll
weren't part of my minutes.
Yeah, I'll talk to Kristen about getting some more information about what's the story there, what are these, where are these 66 students coming from in terms of why are they in the mix? You know, obviously we can't talk about individual student issues, but you know, what's kind of the general pattern of what we see happening. So that shouldn't be too hard to get. Thanks.
I just want to get some clarification, maybe Linda or Nick, but when you don't change your bell schedule and if we have finals, that means we no longer have like that finals bell schedule? Is that what you're saying? Did I just assume that we would still have that?
So if an end of the year assessment were given, and I'm very intentionally avoiding the use of the word final exam, because I don't want it to be viewed that way. I think the traditional view of a final exam is that it's high pressure, high percentage of my final year-end grade, and that's not the intent at all. The intent is to weight all of the exams that the students take over the course of the year, whether it's a common assessment or end of the year exam, as just another test that the students are taking, not like, oh, this test is worth 5 times as much as our regular test. I'm more interested in trying to give the students a little bit of practice in what they might encounter in the very near future than I am in trying to make them feel overwhelmed at having something that's worth 20% of their grade at the end of the school year. And also I think that in all the assessments, they do serve a purpose in telling the staff how well they're doing in working with the students and getting the curriculum across. So it's not, you know, there's always two parts to the assessment. You know, how it's helping the student, how it's helping the staff. I can't say exactly what Frank's end of the year schedule is going to look like, but the intent is not to create a final exam type schedule of hour-and-a-half periods where kids are taking long tests. No, that's not the intent.
So my understanding was they could use more than one day because, you know, if it's
Still
not
the
material,
regular
it's done during
schedule, no
classes.
changing of things, is what you're saying.
We're not doing
Even
anything
at the end
like...
of the year, we're not changing the schedule at all, right?
Okay, so let me say it again. I'm not sure yet exactly what Frank's bell schedule is going to look like.
That's fine. Okay. Now we're up to board forum. We are going to discuss one of our board goals for the year, which is to come up with a procedure to go along with our policy about committees. So some are there's the notes that I had typed up, which just had a whole lot of ideas on it about stuff we could put in the procedure. And then there's a copy of the actual policy, which may need a couple of tweaks. I don't think there's any major, you know, issues with the policy. But we might want to send it to, after we've had a discussion tonight, send it to the policy committee to see if there's anything that we want to change in wording. it's vague enough, like it says the committees may include the following, and then it lists the committees. Now, we've renamed the Community Relations Committee as advocacy, we can change that if we want to, or as the example. You know, we could read through that policy, and see if there's anything else we want to change in it. A couple of things are general enough, but I think they left it that way on purpose, in case people wanted to, add a committee or make some changes like that. So, should we just start going down the list of stuff to talk about committees? I mean, we kind of went over how the committees work last time, and a lot of that's in here about, the agendas and minutes and things like that. So I think that just has to be typed up into verbiage that fits into a procedure. So I guess starting at the top, one thing that some board members wanted to discuss was, we have 5 committees right now. Are the committees meeting our needs? Do we want to change or add any? And then the one example that has come up is we used to have a facilities committee for a short time. And some people have asked whether the advocacy committee is working out well. And after we changed its name, is it any better? So does anyone want to start? Thoughts on that issue? About what committees we have?
Well, I served on both finance and facilities, and one thing I noticed was that the agendas were virtually identical, and so I think that was part of the problem. And I mean, one of the reasons why we ended up not, I think, collapsing the two back into one committee is that you have double the amount of meetings, which means administration is meeting with us, and they're saying the same thing to a slightly different group of people, basically, because there were a number of other people who were involved. So I think that would be the reason why that one changed. I think I also understand that people want to be involved in particular issues, though, and so I think maybe what could be served. I know Priti, you are supporting adding the facilities committee. I would suggest it makes more sense for you to get on be on finance going forward, because then that's really where the facilities discussions happen. It is really hard, and that's a frustration I think that people have, is that when you're a new member of the board, you tend to be on not the committee that you want to be on, and that's just sort of, I know I asked for committees when I first joined the board, and I didn't get anything that I asked for, and part of the reason sometimes is because when you have turnover in the board, at least this is how it appears to me now, is that you want to keep some people on the committee who've been on it before, so you don't have 4 new members who don't know anything about how it normally operated. So, for example, with personnel, I'm the only person on personnel right now who has never been on it before. So it makes sense. If I wasn't on that committee, then you lose a little bit of the history of what happened in the last negotiations. So, but I also understand that people's frustration if you can never get on a committee you want. That sort of, some of these people stay on forever, and maybe we could do something to change that.
Well, I agree that some of the information is redundant between facilities, because that's what finance and facilities is, because that's where the bulk of the money is spent.
Can you make this?
Is that better? That's where the bulk of the money is spent. But since so much money is being spent, I think it's more important to have more board members involved in the process. And yes, administrators may feel that it's redundant. Maybe all the administrators don't need to go to both committee meetings. So, but when you're on, at least I was on finance for the 1 year before it got combined. I was on facilities before it got combined with finance. And you really are looking at the facilities only, and you're looking at prioritizing and finding ways to fund things. We were looking at all different funding schemes that were available through the state, the corporations, and that isn't the only thing that happens in finance. Finance has a lot more happening, I believe, which accounts, where money is being moved, how you fund it, bond refinancing. That's not being discussed in facilities. So it's not completely redundant, and I think it gives more board members informed information. And since most of the money is being spent on facilities, it's worthwhile to bring it back. And it's 2 hours a month of administrative time to keep that information if somebody has to go to 2 meetings. I think it's okay.
I know I was on facilities and not on finance, And by the way, it took me 6 years before I got on finance, speaking of committees. And I do know that, a lot of times the finance, the facilities committee we couldn't vote on items to do anything about them because they had to go through finance. So almost all the items ended up on the finance agenda.
Right, because you have to pay for them. I mean, even if you decide it's a good idea, someone has to then vote to spend the money, and if you're not on that, facilities couldn't do that.
Finance becomes even more all-powered because they're deciding what's being fixed, right? And they're deciding what's getting funded.
But I'm
They're deciding everything.
because finance makes recommendations, but as a board, we vote on everything. It's,
Here's a
that's
simple
the nature.
example. I mean, I don't want to call Nick out on this, but I'm the backup on facilities. I'm going to do it, Nick, because I need to support getting facilities back here. I'm the backup for finance, and there was a summertime, somebody couldn't make it, so I said, okay. But another person couldn't make it. So then, Nick would have to spend a lot of time just educating the 2 new people on finance to finish that finance committee meeting. Now, if we really were that informed and knew everything, then it shouldn't take that much time. And if it does take that much time, that's even more reason to keep facilities and finance, so we can all get more information, so we can make more informed decisions.
Well, I think, let me just say, I don't think that was the reason that Nick felt he wasn't, I don't want to speak for him, but I don't think that's what, I think what happened, because I was chair and I couldn't be there, right? I think what happened was, we didn't have all that much on the agenda that we were going to have to cover, and it was hard to get members, so the idea was, well, instead of trying to put together a meeting with hardly anyone who's actually on the committee, who, by the way, the whole purpose of the committees is these people become somewhat of an expert in the topic, so you want to have people there who are familiar with the topic, they heard about it in the last meeting, so that there is a little bit of time of getting up to speed. So do you want 2 people who haven't heard the backstory, you're going to have to tell them again and again? I mean, I think from the finance minutes, you should be informed. I spend, quite a bit of time trying to really spell out everything we talk about, because I understand. I mean, I've had that feeling before that maybe I'm not hearing about what's on the committee, really happening in committee, but I don't think we have that problem anymore, if we ever did, because I think the minutes are pretty thorough.
They're definitely improved. I do agree with that much. I can say I'm the only one who's speaking up to have facilities come back. I don't know what the other members think.
Well, I just wanted to say I don't think the only way to educate the other board members about facilities is to have another committee. I think there's other ways of disseminating information to the board members. I mean, it could be more discussion during the public meeting about the facilities. It could be, 1 or 2 additional presentations from time to time. So I'm not certain that we actually need to reinstate the committee.
I mean, I did feel when I was on it that some of the stuff we talked about was too much detail for the board because, especially now that we have, engineering, in-house engineering. We went and looked at boilers and I'm going around and they're I don't know anything about boilers. I don't really know that it added much value, that I was looking at boilers because I really couldn't tell you anything about boilers. I was happy to listen. But, I think, to rely on engineers for that type of stuff is useful. I don't know. I just have an overview, kind of presentation of finance. I don't think, I know, when Ken Wilkie was on board, he was an engineer and he knew a lot more about it, so maybe he did bring some, some value to that discussion. Mike?
I think, I agree with Linda, that the key to this whole thing is better, reporting what the committees are doing, and the committees are not making the decisions. I think you have an obligation to ask questions if you want to know more about a topic, and I think that's the key. And I think this last finance committee meeting where we had the budget details, oh my gosh, what a quantum leap. If everybody had a copy of that, you could begin then to ask questions. And I think that's the intent. That's the purpose to have the 9 people here. And curriculum, all of these areas, I think we want to know about, because that's what we're voting on. So at least that's my opinion.
Susan?
Right.
First, I just want to clarify that the board gets the budget details every single month, and I've never missed a month in 9 years receiving that information. The Finance Committee in the past has thoroughly reviewed those finance reports. I remember when Rob first came on, I asked him to give the committee an in-depth review of the reports. And then it's up to the board members to read them and ask the questions. We just, in our last meeting, went through them again briefly. I mean, Mike's making it sound like it was some kind of huge epiphany that we get finance reports, and we get them every month. And we should read them, and if we have questions, we should ask the questions of Mr. McLaughlin. As far as the Facilities Committee, it came out, we first put the committee, established it when we were doing the big building referendum. And it was a definite need then because we were spending a lot of money, and it was a huge, huge project. And we were going into such depth of reviewing all the change orders and the progress that it was stretching the Finance Committee meetings into 4 hours. So we did break it up then so that it was a manageable meeting, and we could look at the referendum, the body issues with the referendum, and a separate Facilities Committee. But after that was all done, and we tried to maintain it for a while, and it just was a lot of redundancy. And there were shared members on finance and facilities, as well as the administration reviewing the same information with the two committees. So it really just wasn't a productive use of time. And with the scope of the changes that happen annually, it's really not a large volume now coming to finance. So I think it's fine to keep it in the Finance Committee. I think it's the efficient way to do it. And I wouldn't support at this time the need for an additional Facilities Committee.
Number one, Susan is very, very knowledgeable in finance. She probably is one of the more skilled on the board. So maybe she can get by with fewer reports than I can. So that's my first comment. Transfers between accounts and the monthly bank statements are not doing it for me. And she may be able to do the accounting and do the catch-up, but I cannot. So I think having the budget summarized year-to-date is a very important first step. We used to do it a long time ago, but we don't do it much. I think there's a lot more work that I'll go on the budget. We need outer years. We got to take a better look at what next year and the year after looks like. I think there's a lot of room for understanding where the district's going. So I'm not happy yet, but I think if the board gets the copies of the reports and understands them, we're going to move forward.
Yeah, I think the other issue that you raised, Mike, is the board goal that we talked about, which is long-term planning and thinking about what the goals are for each committee, which I know we did discuss in personnel. We haven't discussed it in finance yet, but that's something that I'm sure will be on one of our next agendas.
So I guess I'm hearing that we want to leave committees as is for now. The policy leaves it open that, they can choose, whatever wants to add or get rid of committees. Some people suggested that we have like a list of priorities for guiding committee assignments. I know I've discussed with a number of board members, how people don't always get on the committee, as Elaine was saying, that they want to be on. I mean, some of the factors that I think are important is, like I put a few of them in here, you want to have people who have been on it before. You don't want a committee made up of no one that's been on that committee for continuity. You also don't want a committee made up of all brand new board members, no, experienced board members. And, expertise of members, is a factor that, depending on the makeup of the board. It depends on, like for personnel, it would depend on whether we were in a negotiations year. We'd be more likely to have people who have been through that process before on the committee. So that would mean experienced board members who have been through negotiations before. but you also have to make sure that new people get the experiences, otherwise you can end up with a situation where you have everyone who knows what's going on leaving and nobody has sat through negotiations, so you have to think of a lot of factors. I don't know if anyone has anything specific they want to say about that. Committee assignments. I mean, we have had a preference sheet where people put down their preferences, and I almost think that causes more trouble than good, because then people are upset if they don't get what they put down as their first choice, which sometimes happens, or often happens, I guess. Susan?
The only thing that I think is important with the selection is that it remains at the discretion of the president, because it is the president's role for that term to organize a new board, and I feel that that person needs to have the autonomy to make that decision, and I wouldn't want to see something written in the procedure or policy that would tie her or him into a decision that should be made. So I feel that needs to be in the president's role.
When I went to the school board's leadership training, there was a couple of boards, there was a discussion on this topic, and there were a couple of boards out of many that had tried having some kind of schedule for who went on what committee, and it was like a disaster for them because they had a rotating schedule where people rotated through committees, and what happened was, because of the rotation, they ended up with like a committee where no one had been on the board before, and someone was chairing it, didn't know what they were doing, and it just didn't work out. They tried it because people wanted to have experience on different committees, and it didn't work, so, and that's the only thing people I've talked to. I haven't tried anything else.
I can see why it should be at the discretion of the chair. I'm not responsible with that. But what I was wondering is why the superintendent wasn't
I guess that was actually me that put that on
worst
there.
case scenario, I'm not saying you do this thing, but the worst case scenario is I don't want this person on this committee because I want this committee to go easy or hard or whatever. You know, I'm wondering why.
I put it on there because when I became board president, I don't have a history. I've never been on finance before. I just needed, like, historically, like, who was doing what on what committee, like, you know what I mean, and what expertise they have and stuff like that. You know, I asked questions. So we can change that. It's just,
I'm okay with, I personally am okay with this. The board president is elected by the board, so I'm okay.
Okay, we can
with
take
the
that part
board
out.
president decides, but I'm not sure
Okay, we can take
the
that one out.
superintendent should be giving input as to.
Can I just say the superintendent is a member of the board
Yeah.
and the chief executive officer of the district, and I'm perfectly fine with her having referred to me.
Thanks. Mike?
I have no big problem with who's on what committee, but if the committees don't report what was discussed and bring that information to the board, I have a big problem with it. And if by putting some people on one committee and others on other committees, you can dictate what the committees are going to come up with, I have a problem with that. I think the committees have to be objective, they have to represent the board, and they have to bring that information to the board and the public. And if they're manipulated by the board president or by the superintendent or anybody else, they're not doing their job. You know, I want to know what's going on, and you want to know what's going on. And to have it manipulated by a committee is a mistake. So I throw my 2 cents in. I don't care who appoints the committees, but what is very, very important is that the committees represent the whole board and bring the information forward.
Well, I think that's what all the rest of the document is about, which we also talked about last time, was the process by which the committees report out and how people get information if they want more information when they get their committee reports. So I think everybody wants good communication. In the policy, it says the committees could have 3 or 4 members, but I think we've always had 4, at least that I'm aware of, which makes sense because we want to have as many board members involved as possible. We can't have 5, so I don't know why we want to have less than 4. We have an alternate for each committee. I don't know that we usually have to go to a second alternate, except for in the summer occasionally when everybody's away. So I don't know that we need to assign more than one alternate per committee.
I think it wouldn't hurt to just have it on paper.
Well, usually, I mean, they can
Or you
always
could
find
just
some
call
person.
and
Yeah, you
ask
can
them.
find somebody else if you really need an alternate, and your alternate can't come. But it doesn't happen often enough that I think we need to have a scheduled one. We talked already. I guess the only other thing about the agenda was, do we want to put time allotments on the agenda or a targeted length of time for items, or, I don't know, who gave that idea? That wasn't me. I don't know. Well, I think it depends on the committee whether it would be hard to do that or not.
I don't know, it might have been me. I think one of the things that I've often heard after a committee meeting is, wow, that was really long. And I think to respect board members' time, just for their own life, for planning purposes, when do I have to pick up the kids, and when do I have this other responsibility that I have to do, it's nice to have an estimate to when you're going to try to accomplish the end of the meeting. And I think that it's just good form that we have an estimated time, and if we anticipate that a particular committee meeting is going to go long because of the agenda, that we try to talk to people about that ahead of time, just so that people can plan. You know, it's just for planning's sake, really. I'm not one to worry about talking too long and staying too late, but I think that to respect everybody's time, to at least help them plan an estimate for when the obligation is going to end, and also for productivity's sake. I mean, if you start committee meetings at 4 o'clock and you go for 3 hours, I mean, at what point do you start to maybe not process as well as you really want to? It's, you know, for the same reason that sometimes in negotiations, it goes for a while and you just say, okay, that's all we're going to be able to do for tonight because everyone's fried, and we'll continue at the next meeting, schedule for the meeting. So I think it's important to remember that, you know, for most people, it's at the end of the day that they're even starting the meeting, depending on what kind of committee meeting it is. And it's important to recognize that there's a finite level of productivity that's going to happen for an extended period of time. So I'm not suggesting that you can't go more than 2 hours, but try to be reasonable and try to respect people's planning.
I support that. I know we had finance meetings this year that went, I think, over 3 hours several times, and that's just, it is exhausting. But sometimes it has to be, and I think, but it's nice to have that ahead of time. The only committee that we probably wouldn't work for is personnel, because those meetings, I don't think there was one that was less than 2 hours, was there?
During negotiations.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a marathon one that the mediator wanted to stay till midnight. Yeah, it was really long.
Yeah, I mean, negotiations.
We didn't have control over that.
What I do as committee chair, and I think I've done this once or twice in several of the different committees I've chaired, is if I see there's a particularly complicated agenda or complex issue, I will note times on it and then gauge the committee. You know, we've hit our mark to finish this discussion. Are we willing to go a little longer, or do we need to move on? But it's not necessary at all.
I'm just reading through the rest of this. We talked last week about the agendas, the minutes, the fact that they get reported out at the next meeting. We've kind of gone away from having a business meeting versus the committee report meeting, because people seem to want information as soon as possible. And if you wait till a committee report meeting, you could be waiting 3 or 4 weeks, which, you know, is a long time. So we've kind of been just doing committee reports as needed, and then voting on business items as needed this last while. And then we talked about having the committees work on the district goals, which relates to our other board, which Lane already, I've already talked about personnel, having come up with priorities. Sorry, I'm so, yeah, that's why I don't remember who said it. Does anyone else have anything that they want to talk about, that they want for these procedures?
Do you want to go through the whole thing?
Well, I mean, we talked about a lot of it last week already, reading through
How about
how it works. Oh, okay.
Serving on the committee?
Okay.
I don't think we discussed.
Okay, no, we don't.
I think sometimes there's some people who are really qualified and do well on one committee, but sometimes more people need to be able to rotate through whatever that committee is, and we need to have a variety. So do we want to have some term limit of, I don't know, 6 years? That means you can't be on a committee for more than 6 years. So there has to be something
I think it would be-
allows everyone to be on some committee.
I think think it makes sense to a degree to try to get people through, but on the other hand, you have to have flexibility so that the board president can appoint. So I think you could have suggested, so it could be a suggested, I wouldn't have a problem with a suggested limit of a certain amount of years, but once again, if you're in, I wouldn't have a problem with that, but I would have a problem with saying, absolutely not 6 years now.
I've watched presidents over the years try to come up with the committees, and it's one of the most complicated puzzles. I don't envy the presidents who put together the committees because so many factors come into play. You don't want to put people on more than 3 committees, but you don't want to have them on no committees. You have to have a balance of people who are qualified to chair committees on each of the committees. You have to have people with expertise on each committee, but balance with new people, so as the people with expertise move on, new people are learning about the procedures. So I kind of concur with what Elaine's saying, because actually I agree about the term limits, but I don't think we should handcuff the president, because when they try to put this puzzle together, it's excruciating, it really is.
We could put something in there in terms, as far as priorities and guiding the committee assignments about trying to get people on different committees so they can learn all the aspects of the board.
I think I would be supportive of that. Because you're right, there's some arbitrary number that somebody throws out, and may really mess up the balance or something. But I also want to avoid, for whatever reason, somebody being on one committee and then other people can't be on it. So just it encourages rotation. So a philosophy maybe for a second.
Yeah, I'll put it in the section about the guiding, priorities for guiding the committee assignments. Mike?
I have been on all the committees. And some things you're better at than others. And so there is an assignment possibility that, put someone in areas where they're more knowledgeable. But it comes back to, hey, if the committees aren't reported, and you don't know what's going on, that's a problem. If the committees are reported, then you shouldn't feel like, gee, I'm not participating. And it's so very, very important. I think we'd be hard pressed, when I come back to finance, we have 2 months, July and August, and a summer report. I don't remember the last time we had original budget to revised budget after 2 months in the school year. I think that's a big step. Everybody had a copy of it. They can ask, gee, how come line 23 is so out of line?
They do have copies of this.
Yeah, so I think though it's communication, and I think we all have an obligation to know what's going on, and that's why I asked the question about curriculum. Gee, I don't know what that course is about. I think that's all. And the public has the same question, possibly that they can't interrupt. So it's important for the public as well to hear the discussion.
Sure, go ahead.
I have a microphone challenge this evening. So if I could just make a suggestion, it sounds like we want to have a procedure that goes along with our policy 0155, right? And this is not, I will check, but I can say with relative certainty that this policy is not a policy that requires a board action to write a procedure for. Of course, the board wants to support the procedure, but not one that you have to formally resolve to have a procedure for. So I think with the feedback that we've got tonight, we can develop some procedures drafted in a form like this and bring it back so that you have something that looks like this, 0155 procedures. And what I'm hearing is an emphasis on the reporting and the communication that occurs within committees, and maybe some wording about what to do about getting more information if you have questions after you've received the information. And then thirdly, talking about some philosophical guidelines that the board president contemplates when making committee assignments, but it's not obligatory because there's too many variables to tie the hands of that person who's trying to get that job done. So how about if we do that?
Sounds good. Does anyone have anything else for board forum? Okay, we're up to adjournment. Bev? Second. Linda?